When I first started doing this podcast, I was worried about how much time was going to be required sitting in front of my computer between researching and editing. And while I love making these episodes, a part of me dreaded the amount of immobilization needed to record and edit these audios. Alongside my daily barefoot walking practice, I try my best to keep my body as optimally mobile as I can. Sitting for hours at a time editing an audio was not something I felt too good about. So, I explored other ways of sitting, sometimes on the ground in a resting squat position as my computer sits at eye level on a chair or other object. The deep squat is an interesting posture, and it is one that our ancestors used almost all of the time while they rested or socialized. And it is one today that most people in the Western world can't even fully achieve. Today, the only people who adopt this posture on a daily basis to do daily tasks are those living in third world countries, where objects like chairs or sofas are a luxury. The deep squat is different than just what you might think a squat is. The deep squat is where, when you are squatting, your heels are on the ground. Most of us can't do this anymore because we've been sitting in chairs for so much of our lives. Go ahead, try it. Just notice if your heels are touching the ground or if they are up in the air. If they are in the air, then this is not that primal squat that our ancestors used to rest in. This is one example of a primal posture that brings us great resiliency, physical resiliency, because as we get older, we have more and more difficult times getting up from sitting positions as we age, especially in the Western world. But if you could maintain this primal posture, this deep squat, throughout your lifetime, you are creating an optimal range for yourself physically, and this gives us a lot of resiliency. This is just one example of a primal posture that we can be doing in our day-to-day lives to keep us functioning optimally. So join me today as we speak with Aaron Hannon, creator of Naturaletics, as we explore primal postures and primal movement. In movements with names like spider monkey crawl, elephant walk, ape and bear crawl, we explore a new form of athleticism inspired by nature and our innate physiology, in which we embrace our body's full potential. Well, thank you for taking the time to do this today.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for reaching out, and it's always, it's just fun to pass on my insight.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and what Naturaletics is about.
Well, based out of Kansas, so Naturaletics, or myself, Aaron Hannon, I grew up, I played all sorts of sports from just a really young age, pretty much anything and everything. The main sports around here are football, basketball, baseball in the spring. And then as I started to get a little bit older in the high school days, it was track in the spring, and then football in the fall, basketball in the winter. I went through my collegiate life competing in track and field where I did the decathlon. And that was kind of the first time where I really had a sense of knowing that you can learn new skills and achieve, certain goals if you're consistent and you trust in the process. So I was a decathlete, which was 10 events: the 100, the long jump, shot put, high jump, and 400 was the first day, and the second day was the 110 hurdles, discus, pole vault, javelin, and the 1500. So there were several events coming into college where I needed to learn, and you just have to dive in and with courage and continue to work on what you need to work on to achieve the I guess the impossible. Like pole vault was something that was impossible at first, but then it ended up being one of my best events. After college, I kind of took that same mindset and determination, and decided to dive into exploring different routes. And that's where I came across calisthenics, because for a while after college, I had my degree in kinesiology, so I was still doing the same things in my general fitness realm and working for a gym where I was personal trainer, group fitness trainer, and just small group trainer. Where we would lift weights, we would do boot camp classes. I kind of was interested in CrossFit for a while, which I still think CrossFit is amazing for all realms, but it's something where, in my mindset, and I'll get more into it as we speak, that you have cycles of how you can go throughout this idea of fitness, or not the word fitness, this idea of physicality. And so, yeah, what your body needs at the time, or what you enjoy during that season, and what body type you are, if you want to get into that, or what personality, what groups you want to be a part of. But it doesn't have to be that specific group. Like, I don't have to title myself as this and that, but we can go down that train later. But as I went through after my graduated years, I was just doing that for a while. I was still lifting weights. I was still teaching weightlifting, all this type of stuff. But then, like, I came across Instagram and following quite a few people where they were doing like calisthenics and all that. And I was like, whoa, what is this? I think I can do this. I want to get into this. And that's something that it really looks and like it was really inspiring and motivating. And that's kind of what I was feeding off of at that time. Freshly graduated, I was an athlete, so I was really all about motivation, pushing myself, so kind of in that realm still. So I really jumped on the bandwagon of just doing body weight only and calisthenics, and kind of dropped the weights for a year to 2 years, and was exploring that realm. And at the same time, I got into yoga teacher training, and I just went on a tangent of 3-4 years where I was taking lots of different certifications, going to lots of different workshops of all sorts of stuff, from calisthenics, mobility stuff. I came across Animal Flow. I came across MoveNat, FRC, and then lots of different movement teachers. And obviously seeing like Edu Portal stuff online, like I was noticing him and what he was doing, like via YouTube and Instagram, like all these things, like I was coming across. And I was very disciplined being an athlete in college. Like, I could look at stuff and teach myself just by seeing it on YouTube or on Instagram. Like, I knew and had the knowledge to implement that upon my own routine. So it was just a spread of 4 years to 5 years where I was doing these different realms of exercise and movement culture, or physical culture, whatever you want to call it. So then I was just kind of chiming myself as, just natural athleticism. And I always had that idea in my head that, I'm a natural. I do this sport, and I can really be embedded, and created and embedded in that sport during that season, and be instinctive and smooth with it. And then the next sport, the next season, you wouldn't even think that I was a football player during the fall, because now I look like a basketball player, and I'm just natural at that sport. And then same thing, track season came around, and I can naturally pick up this technique for this certain event or that event. And then college came around, and then I was natural at learning all those events. So then that's where the whole thing of natural first came from, is just a natural at the ability. If kind of know what I mean. And then it's turned into both natural at understanding and ability, and natural at the sense of, wholesomeness, uh, natural with, an understanding of earth, where my place is at as a human being. So that side of natural as well, and natural athleticism. So that's what I was kind of titling when I first kind of wanted to throw out a brand. And it all stemmed from like Instagram, when I throw out a brand like natural athleticism. And then I put the two together as Naturaletics, just to put it as one little bunch. And then that's where the whole idea of Naturaletics came from, is just an all-encompassing idea and lifestyle that, it's sport, it's play, it's learning and skills, it's martial art, it's a mindfulness, it's a practice. It's always diving into not one category, but many, and just continuing to try to grow. And just the main emphasis that I already stated is just not one specific thing. So very similar to movement culture, but not my side of things is it's athletics too. Like it's not like a movement culture. I feel like sometimes is very circus arts and acrobatics and martial arts side of the things. And mine is I came from sports, so I really enjoy the athletic side. So like track and field was my
And the
that's still my
challenge
heart.
too.
Yeah, the challenge, the pushing yourself. But then I started to learn like more grace, more I guess beauty in the practice,
Hmm.
instinctual, which I already had when I played sports, but I didn't really embrace it. More sensitivity, like all these things that I got from yoga, that I got from calisthenics, that I got from some of these movement and dance teachers. So, like, just combining all those elements together, and then it changes every season, like how I'm teaching, what I'm teaching, but that's the basis of Naturaletics in a really small nutshell. But it would take 2 years or a year really to sit with me and practice, but still it'd be like, okay, now we need to go into this category of Naturaletics if you want to put it in a category.
Well, I love that because it really does encompass the name. It reflects the name really well
Hmm.
because it is so dynamic. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, exactly.
it just really resonated with me, and it's really cool now that you were inspired by people on YouTube, and now that's how I found you
Yeah,
is through YouTube, and
yeah, it's
yeah.
crazy that it just kind of just springs up because I mean I grew up somewhere and I'm still kind of from the same area where it's not. I'm not from a highly populated area. It's not like nobody knows really where Kansas is at. Like if you're talking people from London or people from New York, LA, like
Mm.
all these big cities in the world, like they don't know where Kansas or Kansas City's from. And I grew up out here and like in,
Yeah,
just in the countryside, just a quaint
it's
area.
nice.
And it's just, things can spring.
I'm in out on the outskirts of a city of only 10,000 people, and I want to keep it that way.
Yeah, it is nice. It's simple.
So, could you share some insight on how primal movement brings benefit to our bodies and to our minds? What is it about this naturaletic ability or this naturaletic
Hmm.
beautiful thing that you've created? What is it about that is beneficial to our bodies and to our
Well,
minds?
I first came across primal and animal movement from Mike Fitch and his program, Animal Flow. And I went and learned from him. I can't even remember. I think it was like 2014 or 2013, and got certified in Animal Flow. And that's when I first was introduced to it. And then I, was just exploring more through Edu and his locomotion and his movement forms, and then other forms of movement and teachers. So just kind of mending them all together. And then just the sense that the way that your body, like in a physiological sense, like how you're moving through these planes. And a lot of times where I'm from, who was attracted to my teaching of primal forms, it was a lot of yoga teachers, not so much dance people yet. So it was a lot of yogis and yoga teachers. So they're a lot of times the plane that they're in is just, you're on your mat and you're straightforward, you're back bending, there's not too much rotation. So with a physiological sense, primal movement and animal flow gives you the boundaries, or it doesn't have boundaries like a mat has. So you're able to
Right.
explore a lot more. You're able to
It's
really
that dynamic aspect of it,
dynamic
for sure.
aspect. You're really able to get a rotational aspect that I was really intrigued by. And it talked about, like, Mike Fitch presented a lot about, like, your fascial planes and your fascial lines and all this that was pretty big back when I was first learning this stuff. Like, it started coming out quite a bit, like right after I graduated my undergrad program, 2010, 2011. Like, you started hearing about anatomy trains and fascial lines and all this type of stuff. So he was quite a bit on that too. So he presented a lot in his program how beneficial it was with these certain patterns and these movements connecting to your fascial lines if you want to present it in a functional aspect. But then if you're going into it with, the idea of wanting to explore, it gives you a sense of playfulness, which a lot of my students,
Mm-hmm.
when I teach workshops or classes, like they just dive into it. They're not really thinking too much. They're not trying to push a threshold like you do in a fitness class. They're just kind of having
Yeah,
fun. And all of a
that's
sudden the class
beautiful.
is over. And then they realize like, oh, I just got a lot better at this certain pattern or this movement that we've been working on for a couple of weeks. And I'm not really thinking of it like a fitness sense. Like, oh, I'm trying to go for
Mm-hmm.
this mark. I'm trying to hold this for 30 seconds, or I'm trying to move this certain load at this certain weight. So it brings back a childlike feel when you're training, but it's also trying to get to that aspect of play that is so hard to do when you start to get out of your college life. If you're in sports, you play at practice, you can compete and play in sport, but then like after all that's said and done in the USA, like society is just kind of like we're just kind of thrown in the fire of work and
Yeah,
driving income and all that type of stuff. Like, what are you doing
right.
for success? And we kind of throw out the idea of social play, social team, like all these things that you understand when you've been a part of a sport team. So it brings that back of like, okay, we're playing around, but at the same time, we're getting stuff done. And then mentally, you're so concentrated. Like when you're first, like when I'm first presenting it, you're really trying to learn new patterns, new techniques, new like sequences. Like sometimes when you teach class and presenting sequence, so it's choreography in a way, like how you would teach a dance class. You can read articles, you can read books about how it's neuroplasticity. You're creating these new networks in the brain. There's been plenty of like big time science people that have a better understanding than I do that talk about neuroplasticity and that every type of movement or new movement that you make is creating new pathways. So it can go into that part too that you don't even think about. So sometimes I'll have students like on a spectrum where they get that. So they're there to just enjoy the ride of like, I'm just here to do just different stuff. Or you'll have students that are so bound in the idea of like, I want to be really good. So then they'll get frustrated. But then it's always like, you don't have to worry about achieving looking like you're a gymnast or like whatever you want to put into it, looking like you do or looking like the teacher or looking like, you know, a ballerina. You're still getting a lot done for you physiologically and then mentally or, you know, your CNS, your central nervous system, that all these benefits are happening that you don't even realize.
I can totally see how any other traditional uh, exercise regimens can really make people very rigid minded because they're trying to achieve this one certain goal, and you're
Yeah.
actually rounding things out and letting that go with the playfulness, and you end up achieving more before you know it because you've been just having a great time.
Before you know it, yeah, it's
Yeah.
just, it comes back. And then like you can present something new every class with, you know, once you pick up on patterns and certain movements, you can present a whole new, like you can learn a certain five moves. Like with animal flow, you can learn certain five, or like with locomotion things you can learn from Edu, like whatever term or whatever word you want to put on that certain move, you can switch those around. Like let's say you put this like an animal flow, you put ape crawl first, and then you can put this under switch, which is another name for a move, and then let's say cartwheel. And then the next day they come to class, you can completely ordinate those to be a different way, and it would be a whole new pattern for them to learn. And then some students would be like, for some reason, I feel like I completely forgot how these moves need to happen because now it's cartwheel first, and then we do an under switch, and then we do an ape crawl.
That's really
So there's
neat.
always a way that you can ordinate a class as far as like, you know, putting it in a structure of physical exercise and going and doing a routine that would still make it exciting and mentally challenging, mentally refreshing, and overall just enjoyable.
Right.
Instead of it being like what we're talking about, you can get into a mainstream idea of I need to go to the gym, I need to do back and buys because you know I've heard of that. I've heard of that world plenty of times.
Yeah, you can really see how people can get into that plateau that everybody talks about with their
Yeah,
exercise regime because they're stuck on that plane, that linear plane versus this really
yes,
dynamic fluid plane. I like that. That's really beautiful. From an evolutionary standpoint, could you kind of
thanks.
give your idea about the importance of floor time because I've really been exploring this a lot lately. I barefoot walk every day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I barefoot hike often. Um,
Yeah,
and Chairs, chairs are funny because they're actually a very recent invention um,
Yeah.
in our human history. And when they first appeared in the timeline, they were actually considered a luxury item. And it's kind of interesting that they've turned into this symbol of control because I recently had a visit to a clinic, and it was so funny. I was just there to pick something up, but I went to the front desk and I asked the woman, I gave the woman all my information. She goes, okay, go ahead and have a seat and we'll call you. And I was thinking, gosh, I sat while I drove here. I sat while I was at home. I don't want to sit.
I'd rather
And then you
just
see this
dance.
waiting room. Yeah, you see this waiting room with chairs everywhere. And it's like a control symbol because it just tells people to sit.
Hmm.
And I didn't want to sit. So I kind of walked around up and down, and boy, did I get looked at like, what's she up to? Like, why isn't
Yeah,
she
why is
sitting
she
with the
so
rest?
nervous?
I did not want to sit. And it's, along with the chair being a recent invention, obviously our physiology has a lot to do with how harmful they are to us and how we've lost our deep
Hmm.
squat. So, can you like expand on that evolutionarily
Yeah,
speaking, how the importance of floor time and all that?
I think another trait of like where animal movement comes from and primal movement is Budokan yoga, and I think Shane, I can't believe I forgot his last name, but who the creator of Budokan yoga, he's based out of Miami, and he has a pretty good interview where he talks about evolutionary aspect of animal movement and this and this and that, and I think he's kind of one of the first teachers that kind of really present animal movement. And with that, and kind of what you're saying, if you look at tribal society and if you look at cultures where there weren't chairs presentable and when you had to go out into the field, when we were actually working with the land constantly, we were in these postures on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And still like, if you want to title it third world country, I've seen an article where it says third world squat. That is
Mm-hmm.
still a resting posture.
Yes,
They'll sit all the way down there, deep squat. They'll
exactly.
rest there. They'll rest there when they're talking with others. They'll rest there when they're thinking. They'll rest there when they're cooking, smoking tobacco by the fire, whatever you want to think of it as. But in our, first world countries, we have so much luxuries that are taking away from our postures that we need to be in for us to stay vital. I
Stay
guess it would
vital
come
and
down to.
resilient.
Yeah, because something that I think Dre DeSpina, like, I'm not completely on it. I might just be soapboxing, but like he talked about how like your posture is your life, like in a way, your posture is your lifestyle, and all at the same time, your posture creates your lifestyle. So you can start to get into this mold here where like if my shoulders are slouching forward, if I'm really starting to slunch in, one that's showing that like I've been in a slump or like I've been in a cloud for 2 to 3 months and I'm starting to form this way, but then I'm going to stay this way unless I change the way that I'm moving my body on a daily basis or I present my postures daily. I'm going to stay in this and it's going to continue to create my lifestyle this way, like it's just this slouch and just tired, sloth, lazy, like all these things that a culture that is presented on high values does not want, but we have them all over the place, like you said.
Falling in line
There's
with
chairs
it.
yeah, we're falling in line with it because we have chairs everywhere, but at the same time we have the opposite where we're so extreme with fitness and diet and the way that we look, but we're not connecting with the emotional side of like how we shape our body is forming and based off of daily, I guess physical sense, but then the way that you're physically standing or like your body, your vehicle is situated is affecting everything else. Your emotional and your spiritual body that's all it's doing constantly. So then you can just get stuck in a certain mold unless you are like what we are talking about, unless you are a part of a practice on a daily or a weekly basis where you have it, 2, 3 times a week will be perfectly fine. If you are every single day where you have something where you're lighthearted and you're able to get into a practice, that's going to keep that block from coming in. Like that's going to combat, like we don't even want, like I don't even want to say combat, but it's going to stay away from that mold that we have in society today of just molding us into this. You're going to stay evolutionary alive, like the question that you presented. You're going to stay a part of what you're being, like your little, like our human body needs to be doing, and you're going to stay away from just becoming structurally stagnant. And that's just the main problem with all this today.
Like the deep squat, I mean, what would you say the percentage is of people in the Western world that can actually achieve that full deep squat?
Mm-hmm.
Probably very little.
You know, it's really small. I don't even know how to put a number on it, but I mean, it would be the younger population would be the ones that are the ones that can achieve it. But if you start to get in the scale of middle-aged people, let's say like 40 and up, they're going to be like, it's going to be surprising to see that like some of them are not even close to squatting. And the ones that can deep squat generally have a background in something that has to do with sport or has to do with um, martial arts, this and this and that. But a lot of people are not familiar with their body and like how it feels, what it feels like to go into certain postures or committing to going into a posture, and just that resistance that comes on from a such a basic posture like deep squat or reaching your arms above your head. And like you can go back to like chiropractic show it all the time nowadays, and physical therapists, like this board of like a baby's evolutionary steps of like, okay, they're on their stomach and then they start to lift their head and then they go to their side and then they start to shift up in the crawling and then they're kneeling and then they're squatting. Like these are all normal things that we've had forever. So it's not like it's something we need to learn, like a power clean or a snatch. Like it's not like technically demanding. Like we've had it forever. It's just the fact that we're not like over here in USA, we're not familiar with just relaxing and diving into.
Rather, we need to unlearn the
Yeah,
bad habits we've picked up.
yeah. And we just need to dive into accepting, we need to dive into embracing more of just, a practice, wherever it is, whatever it is, like go do something active.
Yeah, 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 whatever it is, and keep it fluid.
Yes, I think it's just presenting it to people and presenting it in a way that it's not weird. Like some people are always like, so like there's so much skepticism, or not skepticism, but there's so much critique here that like, oh, that's this or that's just weird, like they're just being weird and trendy, they're doing this and this and that. It's just
Yeah.
like, no, we're trying to present health, and this is what you need to do. Like there's and a lot, and also there's just so much variety and so much choice that nobody knows what is the proper,
Or what's most
avenue.
beneficial, but it truly is limitless, huh?
And yeah, and then you can go down the route of talking about like the waves that have happened over here in USA about fitness. So like you've had the bodybuilding wave that came when like Arnold Schwarzenegger was around, Gold's Gym, like that huge wave that came through Muscle Beach, all that, and what, like the 80s or 70s or whatever it was.
Right.
And then you had like the 90s where it was like all just like power and like steroids and just high performance stuff and athletics. And then you had like 2000s and like CrossFit came on and was like just rolling the game.
Right.
So then like all general population was like going CrossFit. It's just like, nah, CrossFit is for like athletes, like people that are like
Mm-hmm.
sound and understanding and like very strong people, not everyday Joe Schmo who just finally decides to get up. Like, oh, yeah, you're having fun, but you're going to wreck your joints and this and that after a year
It starts
or like
to,
two
it's
years of doing this. Your
intimidating.
back is just, yeah, you're just going to wreck yourself. And then all of a sudden you're going to be out of the loop of like these young guns that are really able to do CrossFit. So then like that came around for a while. And then like you can go back a little bit again, like where you had the fitness videos, all that type of stuff. And then yoga hit a huge scene, a huge wave like this, or like once again, 2000s, 2010. And it just seems like everything like blows up and comes along and everybody's like, oh, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to do. And it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
nobody knows exactly what's going to keep them right and sustainable. And
Right.
then like now bodybuilding is like where I'm from, like here in Kansas City, like bodybuilding is still like a huge thing for like millennials, like my population, and like they are still like on the bodybuilding kick, like looking really good, like trying to lift and all aesthetics and all that type of stuff, and movement and mindfulness with your physical practice isn't as much. Like you have your yoga, but it's still it's understood. I don't know how to say it, but like it's understood as like it's yoga. Like
Right.
some people don't completely understand it, that it's an ancient practice. So it's so trendy here in the United States now that it's
Right.
not even an ancient practice
Oh,
anymore.
it's
It's a
not. Yeah.
business
It's a
in the
business.
USA. It's
Yeah.
trendy, it's a business, and it's yoga. Like you ask any typical, just white, middle class, middle aged American, like what yoga is, they're just like, oh, you mean like that weird, like it's just that practice where like you go stretch, right? And isn't it like Hindu? Like, do you like worship Hindu gods? Like, it's just like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're supposed like you can, and there are some yoga practices, but like you do this, and it's not just stretching. Like you can't explain it to anybody unless you really understand the practice.
When I was in college, I felt that that sort of hesitation to jump into yoga as like a cult practice because I
Mm-mm,
felt that most people were using it just as an exercise, and I thought, I had been a meditator for so long, and I was thinking
mm-hmm.
that's not what it is, and so I
I
didn't
know
really.
there's
I
just so
adopted my
much
own
conflict.
form of it at home, but
Yeah.
yeah, like what you said earlier, even yoga, it's great as great as it is for people's health.
Yes. Yes.
It is rigid because, like you said, it's one form to the next, and you're facing forward. And I didn't realize it that way, but yeah, it really is sort of a rigid form, another rigid
It
form of
is, but it is
exercise.
a
But
great practice for some, like certain people and certain body types. But like I said, it's become such a trend and such a business that there's so many teachers that you don't even know, like, am I really getting what I need to get out of this practice, or am I just showing up for another experience of just, happy hour class? You know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah,
That's what's going on. So like there's not as much like true in depth teachers and coaches that you can have out here. Like those teachers and coaches, you get those through you get those through huge establishments like college programs, college sports, high school sports. That's where you're getting like the rare breed of like a true teacher. But there's
right.
so many so like acclaimed teachers out here without ever learning from teachers, learning from great coaches. We get certifications, we tack on that we're a teacher without even knowing that, like, am I born, do I have like these traits of knowing that I can be a leader? Can I be a teacher? Do I know how to like cue? Do I know how to teach? Do I know how to be in front
Mm-hmm.
of a crowd? But like we're just like, oh, this looks like it's fun, this looks like a fun job, like I'll be a teacher, I'll be a yoga teacher, I'll be a fitness coach. But there's just so many of those out here now that
There's
we
a
just
lot.
have people, the energy is just all over the place. I'll go do this, I'll go do that, I'll go do this, I'll go do that, as teachers, but then also as people that want, like, oh, I want to get fit, I'll go do Zumba class. That was kind of fun. I'll go do this yoga class, this 2 week free trial. I'll go do this. Oh, I'll go to this gym class and do hit class for a while. Like we're just all over the place. There's not like
I
a
can
true
totally see that.
foundation.
Yeah, yeah, I see that. Absolutely, you're right. There's almost little focus in it. Um,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
it's just follow the trend instead of focus on what you need at the time or seasonally or whatever your
Yes,
body is asking
exactly.
for. But so what advice would you give to people wanting to get into this type of movement, this primal naturaletics movement?
I would say research first if there's anywhere in the area that they're from. Like, see if there's a certain group that is practicing anything that has to do with movement, animal flow, and they seem unique, and that you can join and begin to participate, and don't be intimidated, because a lot of times these groups, they seem intimidating because they have high skills with certain things. Like they'll be showing handstands, they'll be showing that they can do flow movement, they can do calisthenics well, but there's also a lot of people that are in the beginning stages that are progressing up, and you'll be surprised of how many little pockets there are out there of wherever you're from, that there are groups that you can dive into it. And if you can't find research wise any group, you need to just find some type of consistency. And like I always just tell people, like if you can't find consistency with going to a group class, then you need to walk daily. Like just get outside and start walking. And then from there, like if once you realize that you can do that for like a month to 2 months of like I dedicated this time to walk, then okay, like walk, like start to change it where you walk 15 minutes and then start to add in a practice of all right, I researched this YouTube person, and or like I got this subscribed to this online person, animal flow person for a while, and I'm going to go through their routine. I'm going to practice my squats and or mobility routine. I'm going to practice this little semi calisthenic routine, like just gradually take steps. But always like you start with getting a really simple dedicated time to a practice, and walking is
Is a
easy,
good way to
or
start.
going to a gym, a certain space. Like if you don't like to be like, you find somewhere where you can go by yourself, but if you're fine with going to a gym with lots of people around, put headphones in and just start milling around, hang on the bars, pick up a dumbbell, do some squats with a dumbbell, just dedicate time first. And then you can start to dive into finding teachers, finding coaches to make it more high performance, more skilled, all that if you want to go to that level. But it's all about consistency and dedicating time to it.
That's great advice. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a standard question I like to ask all my guests, but
Mm-hmm.
before I ask that, is there anything else you would like to add to all of this?
Um, I'm different because I've always been a part of athleticism and being active my whole life. Like I was a little kid, I had siblings. I had three siblings where we were either playing something inside or we were outside running around. We had a little bit of land we were able to explore. So it's hard to like no comparing. Like that's something that happens too nowadays. Like my upbringing and the way that I view physical activity is going to be way different than somebody that might have grown up in a city that didn't have green space and trees everywhere and siblings to play sports with all the time. And then just trying to embrace the idea that like health is so much wealth, like just that easy little cliche term. Like it's just that's what it is. Like we got to start to dive into more of really taking care of yourself and pick up the routine, constant routine, and it's going to help out everything. Because I always say it's, and then all the ancient practices, yoga, martial arts, anybody that has an understanding, physical, mental, and spiritual, they're all connected. When one is starting to rise up, the other one is going to either wake up more or it's going to rise up more, and you're going to balance yourself out one way or the other. And like what you've mentioned a little bit in this conversation is seasonally. Some seasons you're going to be on it, you're going to be training on point, you're going to be leveling, like you're going to level up on your whatever goal you have with physical training. But then there's going to be other seasons where you're just like, I'm tired, I'm still pushing it, so take a rest. You can still do stuff at a lighter sense, but you can still dedicate that time. Like, okay, I started out walking and then I got in this huge routine. I went to the CrossFit gym and I was taking this gymnastics class at a CrossFit gym for 3 months, and I was really getting this. I was getting my muscle up, I was getting my handstands, but then all of a sudden winter came and I'm just like exhausted. I got this injury here. So then take a rest, go back to walking, and or something that has to do with a practice for yourself. Like that's all this is, and that's what it comes down to, is that you're connecting all aspects.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Ohio in the woods, like woods were my playground.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a kid from 5 years and up, I was in trees, but, and I'm
Yeah,
32 years old right now and I'm still climbing trees. So, you know,
exactly. Just still loving it
yeah,
all.
love it, love it, love it. Absolutely. Love your optimal range because it's there for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's there.
Yeah, it is.
Wild Roots is trying to connect people with their wild origins in the best possible way,
Cool.
evolutionarily. These things that we've lost, that we've forgotten, that would bring us so much benefit today. And one of them is just simply connecting with nature. And for me, I like to ask my guests if they could share a story about a special connection or special experience that you have had in nature, whether recent or as a child.
I think the one that comes to mind is like complete opposite of where like I live. I live in the middle of the United States, so like there's no oceans around. But I grew up like we would take vacations to the East Coast, North Carolina. So I was familiar with the ocean, but I took a travel down to the Caribbean towards my after I graduated college, and just every day like we were as part of this program we had time with like swimming, and so just like snorkeling and swimming and just like the refreshing and the healing aspect that it had, being able to be in that clear water was something that I'll never forget and that I'll always want to get back to, like over the summer, like vacations or whatever. Like that's always the vacation I think of, getting back to the Caribbean or somewhere where there's clear water where I can just go swim or scuba. Where I'm from here in Kansas, you're always connected to the seasons, always watching them, always appreciating them. Right now it's spring, so seeing all the colors that are coming out, the sun, the warmth that's coming, and it goes back to cold sometime. The change in right now, the change in it's really warm, and then it can go to thunderstorms. Like everything the seasons present here in Kansas, and just watching them and being a part of them and diving in with them, and not trying to contrast them. So that's all the
Wonderful.
time.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
you're very fortunate to have a newborn right now. You get to explore all
yeah.
those new primal movements through watching your child.
I know, man. He's awesome. He's very observant.
That's really, really
Can't
neat.
wait.
Engaging in physical activity that is not only very healthy, but so much fun, is what will keep us resilient as we age. So keep in mind those primal postures we've all inherited from our ancestors, and remember how much benefit they bring into our modern lives. And be sure to check out Aaron's lessons at Naturaletics, as he will lead you on a primal movement journey towards optimal health. I would like to give a very special thank you shout out to John Marjoram for being my very first Butterfly Patreon. Thank you, John, for supporting my work. This is Wild Roots. Thanks for listening.